You're listening to WCAT Radio, your home for authentic Catholic programming.
Welcome to The Open Door, a show based on the words in Revelation, "I have left an open door before you, which no one can close." This is WCAT Radio's longest-running show, which opened the door to the radio station in October 2016. It's currently offered by Jim Hanink, Mario Ramos Reyes and friends, and remains open to the love of God in its call to build a culture of life and a just social order through the panel's discussion of the Catholic social teaching principles of solidarity, subsidiarity, and economic democracy. The Open Door also explores nonviolence, distributism, and communitarianism. So join us at the Open Door, where you too can be part of the conversation.
Welcome to the Open Door. Jim Hanink here. Today we discuss politics and Texas, the Lone Star State. Our welcome and special guest is Jacqueline Abernathy. She's the gubernatorial candidate of the American Solidarity Party in the November Texas election. Abernathy is a wife, mother, former professor, and public sector consultant from San Antonio. She earned her Ph.D. in public administration and policy from the University of North Texas and an MS in social work from the University of Texas at Arlington. An accomplished pro-life advocate, Abernathy has been shaping policy since 2003, most notably reforming Texas's advanced directive law to prevent medical professionals from removing feeding tubes. She works closely with the Euthanasia Prevention Coalition International and informs with them global policy, representing them as a delegate at the United Nations. Let's begin, as we always do, in prayer. Come, O Holy Spirit, fill the hearts of your faithful and enkindle in them the fire of your love. Send forth your Spirit, and they shall be created, and you shall renew the face of the earth. O God, who has taught the hearts of the faithful by the light of the Holy Spirit, grant that by the gift of the same Spirit, we may be always truly wise and ever rejoice in his consolation. Through Christ our Lord. Amen. Dr. Abernathy, Jackie, if I may, you are running for the American Solidarity Party. For those who aren't familiar, although a number of our listeners are, can you tell us more about the ASP and how it distinguishes itself from the established parties?
Well, I can sum that up actually very easily in the same way that I distinguish myself from other candidates on the ballot here in Texas. And that is, unlike everyone else, we don't support killing anybody. You think that would not make us novel. You think that would be the status quo, not supporting killing anyone. But that's not true. There is no other party that I'm aware of that does not support violence, lethal violence in some form or fashion. We have abortion on the Democrat side of things, physician-assisted suicide, where that is a relevant issue, not so much here in Texas, but it has become partisan and has become settled down party lines, Democrats very much in favor. We have abortion, euthanasia on that side, embryonic stem cell research, and we got the death penalty on the other side, and that is very much a big issue here in Texas. And libertarians are also very much in favor of abortion. Green Party as well. So we are the only option for those people that hold to a consistent life ethic, meaning that we believe in non-aggression, non-violence from conception to natural death without any arbitrary exceptions because, nothing changes a person's humanity, and humans have the human right to life first and foremost. It's the foundation upon which every other right is dependent. So there are no exceptions. We don't kill anyone. We only save life. We never destroy it. The only time it's acceptable to destroy life is when there's no other option for the sake of saving it. Like, for example, self-defense. A good example. So what makes us different is that we are actually pro-life. We're not anti-abortion and anti-death penalty. We are pro-life consistently across the board. We actually are a pro-life party.
How did you find the American Solidarity Party, and how did you join?
I really wish there was some sort of aha moment and I could point to one particular person that I met, or I really don't know how, but how you just feel, in a way, like-minded people of goodwill that share a heart and share values, just tend to kind of find each other from the most remote places. For some reason, they just divinely end up in the same place. And I was not even aware of the party, that it existed, until after I had already committed my vote in the 2016 election. I committed my vote I was trying to make a point with my protest vote that I didn't consider, back in 2012, that I didn't consider Mitt Romney pro-life, because he was campaigning on both sides, out of both sides of his mouth, campaigning as a pro-lifer to protect unborn babies, but then also advertising his support of rape and incest exceptions. I'm like, you can't have it both ways. That was something I couldn't reward. And that was when I broke from voting for any major party candidate ever. I've never voted for a Democrat that's not anti-abortion, not pro-life. But I had already committed my vote to a very hardcore, disturbingly fundamentalist other third party here in Texas that's, very much believes in the death penalty. But they are what you consider abortion abolitionists. So they're very extreme in that they, don't want regulations. They want complete and total abortion abolition. I'd already committed my vote there, and I regretted it the second I found out that we actually had a pro-life party. I could have endorsed and voted for someone that doesn't support killing anyone. And I was so relieved to find that, because it needed to happen. I've been preaching for years that the whole lesser of the two evils approach, it lets evil set the standard, and it only results in more evil. All someone has to do to win your vote is just be a slightly less evil than the other guy. And I saw the end game of that as kind of what they have in Canada, which is essentially what's considered a pro-lifer is vote for me and at least I'll leave the unborn alone. Versus the other party, the Liberal Party, is going to advance abortion every chance they get. With me, at least I'm not going to make it worse. And I could see that happening. I said, there needs to be, first of all, a pro-life protest party anyway. There needs to be some way where we can do our civic duty. But also pragmatically, it's just going to get worse if we don't, stand up. And so I found out about them when Trump became, after I'd already committed my vote, because Trump is emphatically not pro-life either. That's when I became involved with them. And I wish I had known about them earlier, because they had been around for at least a decade, I believe. We've been around for a decade, I think.
What about the social policies, the economic policies of the Solidarity Party? Is it leaning towards capitalism or leaning towards socialism, or is it something quite different?
We don't lean. We're actually very, it's one thing that I really, one thing I love, and you can hear the sarcasm, the sardonic tone, is the binary assumption that if you are in favor of one thing by default, if you're not one thing by default, you're the other, right? If you're not capitalist, then you must be communist, right? If you're not socialist, then you must be. Our economics cannot be defined. If you define it in any way, we're distributists. And I'm happy to explain that more. But when it comes to social policy, you assume that, okay, well, if you're pro-life, you're anti-abortion, then you must also support everything else typically associated with a religious right, which we do not. So when it comes to social policies, we support basic human rights, basic dignity for all, regardless of the composition of a family. So for single mothers, for the traditional nuclear family, for same-sex couples, etc. We do not believe in the concept of, Dorothy Day actually said it best, the gospel removes our right forever to believe that there could be a deserving and undeserving poor. We don't believe that either. So unlike social policies that set this strict criteria for who is worthy or unworthy of receiving help, we believe in the whole concept of, well, for example, universal basic income is a good example of that. So our social policies, when someone hears about a social policy, it's like, oh, wow, you're a bleeding heart liberal. But then they hear that I'm anti-abortion. I'm like, oh, man, you're a right-wing nut job. I get accused of supporting things that I find atrocious. Every time I've stood up for unborn babies, I get accused of supporting the ripping of children away from their parents at the border, the migrant children, that the family separation, which is something I've always condemned. Now, anytime I condemn family separation, I get accused of supporting abortion because people have already decided, they've already lumped in these, if you're one, you're the other. We are neither liberal nor conservative. We are a mixed bag that is dependent upon what the issue is. And I've always put it this way. My conservative friends think I'm liberal, and my liberal friends think I'm conservative. The truth is, I am just Catholic. And the American Solidarity Party, while it's open to all, it's not just Catholic, it's based on Catholic social teaching. So all of the things that make me, too liberal in some ways and too conservative in others are just following Catholic social teaching when it comes to welcoming the sojourner, not oppressing the foreigner, protecting human life from conception to natural death. Economic policies like distributism, for example, which is not socialism, it's not capitalism. It is the idea that we should have an ownership economy. So it's kind of when they say, well, are you this or that? Well, when it comes to us, we're neither this nor that. I kind of think that we take the best of both worlds and we come up with a common sense middle ground solution to the two polar extremes. Because we have a lot of false dichotomies when it comes to politics. You're either, pro border security or you're pro immigration. Well, it doesn't necessarily mean if you believe in not oppressing the foreigner that you also believe in completely open borders. This is just not the way it is. Our policies are based on what we feel promotes the public good and the general public welfare on each individual issue. And they're based on principles consistent with the Christian democracy, parties you see in Europe, the Christian Democrat parties, and, like I said, Catholic social teaching.
You could be advocating for this kind of, what should I say, both and position without running for governor, but you're running for governor. How did that happen?
Oh, well, when you can either be part of the problem or part of the solution. And we have a problem in Texas. The duopoly itself is a problem. But it's kind of interesting to me that this solution never occurred to me when I had a similar problem as a Texan, the last election where it was Ted Cruz versus my opponent now, Beto O'Rourke. So for senator, I had the option of, there was no write-in that I was aware of. I looked for a write-in option, but it was, Beto O'Rourke, abortion extremist, absolutely unacceptable, someone I would never vote for. And Ted Cruz, who is Ted Cruz and someone I would never vote for a whole host of other reasons, things that I find offensive to basic human decency. So I was looking for an option there, and it disturbed me. It broke my heart that I was essentially being given this impossible choice between not doing my civic duty, which I have a problem with, particularly as a woman, having read my history and realizing that, suffragists were chained to pipes. They really fought hard to give me the right to vote. that I now have. For them to do that and me not to exercise that, and for the stakes to be so high and me not to advocate with my vote seems unconscionable to me. But also, what is more unconscionable than casting a vote for somebody that is telling you in their campaign, vote for me, and I will make it as possible and easy to kill unborn babies as I can. I can't vote for that person. Or, vote for me, and I will continue defending, these atrocities when it comes to immigration policy and the federal death penalty, for example. Basically, all of the things that Trump ushered in that Ted Cruz went along with very enthusiastically. That's, I can't violate my conscience, and I can't not vote, but I ended up not voting. When I had to choose between those two things, I'm like, no, I can't be complicit. I can't even remotely cooperate with any of these things. I cannot choose between these two people. They are both unacceptable, and unacceptable means unacceptable. And here we are thinking, okay, Abbott versus O'Rourke. Once again, that O'Rourke, abortion extremist. Deal breaker. But Greg Abbott, even though I have worked with him forever. In fact, I was state's expert witness against the abortion industry, Planned Parenthood, when they sued to stop a law that we had passed. He was Attorney General, and I was commissioned to come in and be an expert witness to defend that law. So I've been working with him for a very long time. In fact, I have a picture of me at a bill signing for my feeding tube bill, standing, smiling next to him. And I appreciate everything he's done. But in the last couple of years, particularly, some of his actions are completely unacceptable and just disgust me and break my heart. Somebody had to vote. It's important. I mean, someone had to be a candidate so that we could vote. And it's also important not only to give people a chance to do their civic duty, but to be a witness to what faithful civic action looks like among followers of Jesus Christ. Because we have this horrible blasphemy, that's driving people away, and rightly so, where people have co-opted the idea of Christianity and associated it with things that are completely completely go against everything that Jesus taught, right? Like we have Christian nationalism. So it's important that I run, or somebody run, that represents actual civic responsibility and faith that reflects the teachings of Christ. We are not, running as Christian anything. We're running as just supporters of common sense, consistent life, etc. But just existing as somebody that authentically represents Christianity in public life and in civic life is important, because otherwise all that exists are people that wrongly misassociate any sort of Christianity with things that Christ himself, was very clearly against and what he would oppose vehemently. I ran because this is important for public witness. This is important for so many reasons. And that's why I agreed to run.
I'm sure that you're outspoken.
What gives you that impression?
And wide-ranging and authentic responses are generating lots and lots of questions. And I have lots and lots of questions. And you can deal with them as you wish.
It's funny because when you said that was the thing I was worried about. When they said, well, you run, I'm like, you do not want me. Because when I'm asked what is intended to be a gotcha question, like a straight up gotcha question, and instead of, being very careful with my words to put it in a way, no, I just answer it straight. So you want all abortion to be illegal. You just don't want, no exceptions way. You want all abortion illegal. Yes, I do. And let's throw in the death penalty, euthanasia, embryonic stem cell research. Let's throw in a lot of other things. But yes, I want it completely illegal. And, this is the person that you are asking to represent you. I'm not going to, I'm not going to offer, these polished, sanitized, carefully planned responses, talking points. I'm just going to say it the way it is. My views accurately reflect the party. So there's I wouldn't possibly be misrepresenting the party in any way, but I'm just letting you know, this is what you're getting. And they said, no, that's exactly why we want you to run.
All right.
That's why we want you. But anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry. You had a bunch of questions.
I see you as in the tradition of Peter Moore, and co-founder of the Catholic Worker, who said, among other things, the future will be different if we make the present different. And you want to make the present different by having a political voice that speaks to the gospel. And you also
just make me happy too. Just basic human decency would make me happy.
And also you present this as common sense. Now, if someone were to read the scripture on the scriptures with regard to the Sermon on the Mount, if you read that and then when you finished reading it, you said, and that's just common sense. What would the response be? That doesn't sound like common sense at all. That sounds like fact, some sort of.
It's not common sense.
It's amazing grace.
Once takes your cloak, give them, someone asks you to go a mile, go to. These are, turn the other cheek. These are the reason why these teachings were so, different, so impactful, or they are so contrary to our fallen human nature, our fallen sinful human nature. When I say common sense, I mean pragmatic solutions to things. Not necessarily because, is it a common sense? A lot of things that by the way, love is inherently irrational. Something rational is maximizing your utility, trying to get the best possible outcome for yourself. Love is inherently irrational because you're not thinking of yourself, you're thinking of someone else, and you do things actually that could be, hurtful to yourself for the sake of others. So, love is not necessarily, common sense, certainly not rational. But so when I say common sense, I'm talking more about the pragmatic aspects of social civic life, like a safety net. Let me give you an example. Let me give you an example of pragmatic aspects. When it comes to common sense, by the way, we have this issue with extremism, and you hear the phrase often common sense gun laws. That's the sort of thing I'm talking about when I say common sense, that we should be able to disarm a person that has already warned us, identified to us that they are a threat to themselves or others. We should have red flag laws. We should have, we don't treat weapons that are designed to kill. That's their purpose. That's how they act. We don't treat them with the same level of respect and reverence we treat cars. You have to have training to drive a car. You got to get a license to prove you're trained. You have to have insurance if, you have to do something with that car that hurts other people. You have to have it inspected for safety. You have to maintain it. We don't treat guns like this at all. These would be common sense gun laws. So when we say common sense, we're not talking in a philosophical aspect, but we're talking in merely a practical one. And so look at, blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Areas where we want to show mercy with our social policy are common sense and pragmatic. And here's why. Feeding people, the cost associated with meeting people's basic needs, with programs like, supplemental nutrition assistance and housing, these programs. The the costs associated with those programs, either we can pay for prevention, we can pay to feed people, we can pay to provide healthcare for people, or we can pay for the consequences and the aftermath of not doing that, which is far more expensive anyway. And for what? In Texas, we have not. We're one of the states that 39 states have expanded Medicaid. We have not. So the only option that we have here in Texas for people to get healthcare if they're poor and they can't afford it, for the most part, is the ER because of the federal law, the EMTALA, Emergency Medical Transportation and Labor Act. That's what it stands for, which says that a hospital ER has to treat you and stabilize you if you or your unborn baby are at imminent risk of death. That's basically what has to happen. They can't get preventive care because we have these stringent rules associated with Medicare as it is. You know, an able-bodied person without dependents cannot get Medicare, no matter how poor they are. So we're basically telling people that, okay, wait until you get sick, so you're on the verge of death, something that, you know, antibiotic would have helped, vaccine would have helped, for example, could have prevented. Wait until that happens, go to an ER where the cost associated with saving your life will be, 10 to 20 times how much it would have been to have prevented the crisis in the first place. To me, it's common sense to provide preventive care at less money than to waste money dealing with a crisis that doesn't need to happen, and without all that pesky suffering. So, mercy is healthcare. Healthcare has always been something that was, considered an act of mercy. In many ways, it's a corporal act of mercy, taking care of the sick. So I would say it's common sense to take care of the sick in a way that is just most not only compassionate, but the alternative is foolish and wasteful. Does that explain a little bit more about how we apply?
Yes, it does, and I'm gonna give you another test question. I think test question number 1 you've handled very well. Test question number 2, and this connects with your work with the Euthanasia Prevention Coalition International. You said that euthanasia wasn't a problem, a notable problem in Texas. It's a notable problem.
Assisted suicide is not here's what I meant. Assisted suicide, which is the pet strategy of what used to be the Hemlock Society, but now rebranded as Compassion Choices. Their priority is assisted suicide, physician-assisted suicide.
Yes, then I'm switching now. I'm switching now to California.
So that is not a threat, but we have had euthanasia in the United States everywhere. So I'm not saying that it's not an issue here. I was talking specifically about it.
Yes. Okay. Now here in California, we have physician-assisted suicide.
I know. I was there.
We have a governor who, in a lengthy interview in the New Yorker some years back, spoke about how he provided his mother with the drugs necessary to end her life. And this was before we had assisted suicide. And now the most recent action of the legislature, certainly endorsed by the governor, is that our assisted suicide laws no longer require anything more than a 48-hour waiting period, and no second opinion is required. Now, in ordinary, everyday debates about this, I think Christians want to say at some point, and I don't know the best way to say it, and this takes us back to the gospel, that there's a fundamental role for redemptive suffering. And I think in our context today, the majority of people would say, no, there isn't, and I don't know what the deuce you're talking about anyway. But for us, there is a fundamental place for redemptive suffering. Now, at the same time, there are what I think you would have in mind as common sense arguments against physician-assisted suicide. So here's your second test. Pragmatism, common sense, and the gospel somehow coming together if people would just give us and you a chance to say how.
Okay, I can tell you how. First and foremost, of course, I believe in uniting our suffering with the cross of Christ. Of course, I believe that. But that has never, ever come into my motivation against assisted suicide ever. It has never been the fact that it denies people the chance at redemption through suffering. I don't want people to suffer. If I can prevent it, I want it with pain control, with morphine, with palliative care. I want to do that as much as possible. I believe that there's plenty of suffering in life just inherent to the fact that, we're fallen people. And, we've got disease and death and all the consequences of sin in the world. I certainly don't want to add to it. I think that, redemptive suffering is just dealing with the inevitable suffering that you're taking, and using that, for your, for sanctification and for the good of others. So redemptive suffering, by the way, never factored into my rationale against assisted suicide. And I don't think, if I were trying to convince somebody, that is not Catholic. And if they're Catholic, by the way, I feel like it's a foregone conclusion that they would not need convincing about euthanasia anyway. When I discuss this, assisted suicide and why I am so opposed to it, it goes down to pragmatism more than anything. Well, let's do this with some bullet points. It's always cheaper to kill than to care. It always is nice when people can have a cop out of, okay, no, we're not going to pay for your pain control, but here's an overdose of barbiturates. So you don't have to suffer. You can always just end it all. So I don't like that. That it incentivizes not taking proper care of people, because compassion means to suffer with. And instead it's just like, okay, well, instead of, caring for you, and being alongside with you, I'm not going to talk you down from the ledge. I'll just give you a push and we can be done with it. My arguments have come from a disability rights perspective, about the fundamental problems, dangers, and injustice associated with having two classes of citizens, one that gets suicide prevention and the other that gets suicide assistance. How disturbing is that we're so opposed to the idea of a person killing themselves if they're an able-bodied person, if they don't have an illness, that we will take them into protective custody to keep them from doing that, to keep them safe. We'll put them on a psychiatric lockdown. But if someone is not physically perfect, they're dealing with some sort of illness, injury, disability, so something that makes them, that's irreversible and makes them not want to live anymore. When they say, well, maybe I should end them all, maybe I'd be better off dead, our response was, okay, I'll help you. This is a problem. Having two different classes of citizens, it just goes in complete contrary to everything that we believe in the dignity of human life. But, it's dangerous when all of a sudden we said to an entire group of people, well, we said to everybody that if you, suffer a terminal illness or disability, that, your life is no longer worth living. We've already agreed with you that, if we were you, we want to end it all, better off dead than disabled, better off dead than sick. There's problems associated with that. This is primarily how I go about my advocacy against assisted suicide. And I remember, by the way, I fought so hard in California. They cheated. I have to say this on the record. There's only assisted suicide in California because they cheated. We had defeated the bill. And they resurrected it in a special session because they would be able to, even though the special session was on transportation, they could bring the bill directly to the floor where they knew they had the votes. They couldn't get it out of committee. We had killed it. They cheated, and that's why we now have it. And I'm so disturbed because I was praying and fasting and fighting so hard because of the population in California, and also because of California's influence on other states. So it was really important for people's last act not to be one that you do not want to do as your final thing you do on earth before you face judgment. So my arguments have always been about justice and just the pragmatic concerns associated with this provides an opportunity to deny people that might never, Catholics, for example, would never take assisted suicide as an option. But the fact that it's there might give an incentive to those who don't want to provide something that we really need. Well, we don't have to provide you pain control because we can provide you with euthanasia instead. Well, that's no good for somebody that's never going to choose it. These are my concerns.
I accept and welcome and oftentimes employ all the arguments from justice that you've presented, and you presented them very well. And you're right to point out the cheating, as you say, on getting that physician-assisted suicide bill in place. At the same time, were the people of California to vote on assisted suicide today, they would vote in favor.
Yes, they would. But I believe that they would have done that then too.
Let me try to tighten the screws a little bit here. They would vote in favor of it. And a great many people would say that the justice issues can be dealt with, not that they'd say when or how, but they'd say they can be dealt with. And what would really motivate them is their experiences with people dying with great suffering, and the kind of suffering that comes from the use of medications that are really necessary to make the suffering even less. And it's at this point, I think, that Christians need to say something along the lines of St. Paul. I make up in my own body the sufferings of Christ on the cross. And this, I think, would stagger the imagination of most people. But at some point, I think it needs to be said. It's interesting that you say, and as you know, I agree with you.
And I agree with you, right?
That the arguments from justice are powerful arguments. And it's very interesting for me to note as a philosopher that Alistair MacIntyre, with whom I often agree, but not always, has recently argued that appeals to human dignity are fuzzy, and that human dignity can be lost, which I disagree with. But he too said we must always appeal to justice arguments first and foremost. Now, I think we should talk long and hard about the role of justice arguments. Nonetheless, whatever their role is, it seems to me that there's an inescapable Christian commitment to the notion of redemptive suffering, which escapes the mindset of most people today. Now, I want to add to this, and this is the third test question. I wholeheartedly agree with you that same-sex couples ought to have civil rights, but I would not say that those civil rights extend to marriage, simply because marriage has its own internal logic. Now, that kind of internal logic for marriage, I think, is not only challenged and oftentimes denied, but we've gone, I think, of late from a discussion of what sex is about, what sex is for, to now, what is sex? When we talk about the transgender ideology. And so you get to something very, very fundamental, like, we would say philosophical anthropology, the nature of being a sexed person. And that too, I think, escapes public discourse in that most people can't really bring themselves to address those issues. And if they're brought to address them, they don't know what to say. The ruling dynamic here in Los Angeles is one of the great fatalities of the COVID thing was the gay pride marches. And now, thank God, they're back. And you don't have to have a special gay pride march in order to have 100,000 people turn out. 100,000 people, including politicians of every stripe. Now, entering that social reality, I think, is not easy.
You know, I have no problem with it all, but I don't have a stance on it that really jives with any particular group, and here's why. I absolutely am. I believe in sexual morality. I believe in natural law, and I believe in all of the teachings of the church. So there's that, and I don't.
That's a lot.
Yes, and I don't compromise that. So before I get misinterpreted as being in favor of gay marriage, I'm not. My concern, my issue with when it comes to gay marriage, I am disturbed that marriage has not been for decades what you were correctly saying it was. So it became a point where heterosexual couples didn't have marriage either. When marriage ceases to be permanent, when we got unilateral no-fault divorce, and people could do it wasn't a forever union anymore. When we had the contraception, the advent of contraception that could divorce sex and procreation. It also divorced, sex and to divorce children from marriage. Have you noticed? And then, of course, we had a massive increase in out of wedlock births and single parents. Everything that Humana Vitae predicted pretty much was spot on. But one of the casualties of that was heterosexuals, even though we can have a valid marriage because we are able to fulfill the purpose for which marriage exists, which is the continuation of the human race. And marriage is necessary because this is the environment that children have a right to and deserve in order to thrive. The daily relationship with their mother and their father together working for their well-being. We have marriage because that permanency is necessary. This is the unit, the building block of society. These are important things. But by the time gay marriage became an issue in the political arena, the arguments against it were coming from people that gay marriage is wrong. I don't want gays to get married, who also themselves don't have, you're not married either, are you? You're not completely married in the sense of all of the things associated with the natural, physical, philosophical purpose of being married. So what this became to me was not anti-gay marriage as a way to be pro returning to traditional marriage and the values associated with traditional marriage. What it ended up being by default was just, we have rights and privileges to property, and making healthcare decisions for each other, the things associated with marriage. We, as heterosexuals married to someone of the opposite sex, have these things. We just don't want you to have them because marriage is for straight people. Yes, technically marriage is, in the real sense, for what it's worth, marriage is for heterosexual people, natural law, because you have to have a man and a woman in order to have a children and have a family. But it turned into less about the dignity of marriage and more about just the being exclusionary. I certainly don't think that a way we fix the problems with marriage are to make it worse, to stray even further away from what we're supposed to do. So I'm not in favor of gay marriage because I feel like that's going in the wrong direction. But, I'm absolutely also not in favor of same-sex couples who, one of them dies and, the next of kin happens to be an adult child. And all of a sudden the survivor is kicked out of their own home that they've lived in forever. I don't like the idea of, somebody not allowed to make decisions and advocate for their loved one when they're facing decisions regarding life support. These were the consequences of, by virtue of being married. These are things that we just take for granted. These are rights and privileges we have as married people that those in same-sex unions did not have. I believe that marriage, sadly, when it comes to the civil aspect of it, has essentially just become a social contract. It's an important one. It's because, it governs, property and, it tells us who goes with who. And then especially for the sake of children. But I believe it's kind of been, reduced to, what its purpose is in the civil arena, not what its divine greater purpose is. And I absolutely want everyone, regardless of whether they're same sex, they're heterosexual or homosexual. I don't want anyone to be harmed. I don't necessarily think that, I didn't think that marriage was necessary to fix that, but there was an inequality there. There absolutely was. And so it was always difficult for me because, no, I don't support gay marriage, but also I don't support any group of people having fewer rights than another group of people, especially when those people technically are not fulfilling the purpose of marriage either. It was really funny because remember the advocates when this was a big issue were like people like Newt Gingrich. I'm like, yes, the sanctity of marriage. I've done it like what? He'd been married 4 times. Every time, a spouse got sick or something like that, he would leave them for someone else. These are the people that are saying that gay marriage is wrong. I mean, messenger doesn't change the message. Even if someone's a total hypocrite and they say, because go out and have all sorts of sexual relationships, but then they say, no, promiscuity is wrong. Well, they're not incorrect. Promiscuity is wrong. Just because they happen to be a hypocrite and not practicing what they preach doesn't change the fact that they're correct. Promiscuity is wrong. Those people were correct. That gay marriage is not marriage, and it's stepping away. It's veering even further from where we need to be. But I feel like heterosexuals have to clean our own house first. We really need to reform civil marriage law so it has meaning again. Because what's the difference? I mean, yes, I guess a heterosexual couple that are contracepting and both of them have been sterilized. I guess technically because they happen to be, there's a chance that there might be children, but how are they functionally much different from a gay couple? We have issues that we need to address if we're trying to uphold, the ideal things as they should be. And I don't think that we have any credibility until we do that.
Hypocrisy certainly undermines argument. It certainly does. What is it? Hypocrisy is the tribute that virtue pays to vice, or the reverse, or both at the same time. Nonetheless, and we needn't explore this at any length, the rights that are at issue can be addressed, it seems, without same-sex marriage. And the deeper question, it seems to me, is how it is that the whole debate gets played out in terms of rights rather than, while not forgetting rights, the very nature of human sexuality and the very nature of man and
because
woman.
we don't have it. And here's the thing: why is it played out in an issue of, in framed as rights rather than the very nature, natural law of human sexuality? It's because we have violated the very nature of human sexuality through contraception, and divorce, and everything forever. We no longer have marriage either. What we were saying was that we don't have marriage, but we still have the civil rights of you, Dwight, but we just don't want to have it. That's why it was framed that way.
Yes, and so it seems to me that we need to, while acknowledging rights, have to look to the nature of the person that the rights are supposed to help develop and protect. But now I want to move to yet another difficult question.
Darn, because I was kind of hoping to talk about the rights of children in there, because an issue with gay marriage, it's not about the adults. It's about concerns regarding parent-child relationships and the right to a mother and father, and this belief of putting two people on the birth certificate, even though the birth certificate is supposed to be a record of a child's origins, and they can't be there are concerns in the gay marriage, traditional marriage debate that have absolutely nothing to do with being with sexual morality and have everything to do with children's rights. And I feel like those are arguments that we're not having. Those are discussions we're not having. And that's not something you hear enough of. But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go ahead.
No, just a quick sidebar on an earlier discussion, and then I want to go on to something new. If you die of physician-assisted suicide in California, that's not on the death certificate.
Right. No.
It's
the diagnosis.
You die of
it's something else.
So what you have here is a fundamental mendacity, and it's not addressed. Now, going to the next question.
They get really mad, by the way, if you use the word suicide too.
Yes. Going to the next question. If it's wrong, and it surely is, to kill the born and the unborn, the healthy and the gravely ill, by the use of nuclear weapons, it's surely wrong to deliberately threaten and make that part of one's public policy to use nuclear weapons against the innocent if sufficiently provoked, which is why Dorothy Day said this decades ago, which is why I think that Pope Francis is saying the ownership of nuclear weapons is wrong. Now, no Democrat is going to say that. No Republican is going to say that. I think we are free in the American Solidarity Party to say that, although not all party members would want to say that, but we're certainly free, and we're understood when we say that in the American Solidarity Party. Now, how fundamental a change in the American mind it would be to get that argument out and discussed and taken seriously. Do you have any chance of doing that? My own activist days began once upon a time, going down memory lane, picketing the Alamo in San Antonio during the Vietnam War, especially on Saturdays when the troops came by to see such things as the Alamo. And how well I remember a particular avid young fellow saying to me, "You're a fanatic." A fanatic, not a fanatic.
Okay, so I'm like, I did not know that.
You fanatics are out here. Don't you know that this is absolutely necessary?
I'm going to use that now, by the way. That's how I'm going to pronounce it for the rest of my life. Fanatic. Mm-hmm.
At any rate, here we come to something called Christian nonviolence and rock central Christian commitments. It is always, as you say, it is always and everywhere wrong deliberately to kill the innocent. And it is certainly the case that it's always wrong to seriously threaten to kill the innocent. Now, you try getting that as a standard. Let's see how the debate on that is going. There is no debate on that.
Yeah. We were, for horrible reasons, we were given an opportunity to address this. Sadly, I hate that this happened where it would give us the opportunity, but I don't feel like we capitalized on that the way we should have. And that opportunity was Donald Trump and his extreme fetishism for nuclear weapons, and just explicitly saying that he would not only go after terrorists, but he would also go after their families, non-combatants. That, this is a war crime. It's like the Geneva Convention never happened. So when we had someone that was being endorsed by half the country, and they agree with it. There was not a major uproar when he would discuss the use of a device that exists for the sole purpose of annihilating as many human souls as possible. That really, I feel like we should have spoken out more vehemently against that. I think part of the reason why there wasn't more of an uproar, like from the Catholic bishops, for example, groups that have the ability, have more of an audience than we activists do, that independent grassroots folks do. I feel like the reason why that wasn't dealt with as much is because at the time when these threats were being made, I don't think a lot of people took Donald Trump seriously. But then again, remember when he had that delightful Twitter war threatening North Korea. Like, I have a button too, and my button actually works. There was an opportunity as well where we should have stepped up and we should have discussed the inherent immorality associated with disproportional weapons. There is not a legitimate purpose for, not legitimate self-defense purpose for a nuclear weapon. I mean, there is for example, if you have, Jesus, in fact, in the Gospels talked about having a sword, carrying a sword. There's a legitimate use for weapons for the sake of neutralizing a threat, not for killing, not for destroying, but for saving life that is in danger, for stopping the threat in order to save life, protect life, not destroy it. When you have weapons that are so beyond anything, that any kind of legitimate use for a good moral purpose, and I would actually throw assault rifles in there as well. So yeah, nuclear weapons, that's the big one. That's the top. But I would argue that assault rifles are that argument's the same as the one against nuclear weapons. My argument against assault rifles are these were designed, they should not be in the hands of civilians. They were designed based on the military version of it, to kill as many people as quickly as possible, as efficiently as possible, with wounds that cannot be repaired, leaving large cavities in people's bodies. There's no legitimate self-defense purpose for an AR-15. In fact, it's so unwieldy. It's not like something you can grab in a pinch because it's really long. It's not something you can store safely because it's really long. You would need a very specific kind of safe for that. But any rounds that you fire in self-defense in your home can easily penetrate the walls and endanger everyone around you that you're supposedly trying to save. There's proportional and disproportional responses to threats. the non-aggression principle, there is such a thing as just war. But nowhere do I find it morally permissible for humans to have weapons that exist to kill and increase the likelihood of killing when killing is not necessarily required in order to protect life. You can neutralize a threat with a handgun. You do, unless you have an army attack coming through your front door from a distance, and you need the ability to shoot from a distance, and you need multiple rounds, and they are so inherently dangerous that they have to be taken out right away. They can't just be, down and sent to the hospital and potentially repaired and have a chance to repent. There's no moral purpose. Like, certain things are morally neutral. Knife is morally neutral. I can, make dinner with it, which is, a good thing. Or I can slit someone's throat, which is a bad thing. These weapons are not morally neutral. James, they're not. They are inherently morally evil.
Yes, and even a handgun in the home is likely to increase the chances of some member of the family being killed.
Yes.
Or oftentimes
by
suicide. Well,
yeah. Well, I do want to mention, because this is talking, I'm sorry, I know that we're low on time, but I do want to mention, this is very important. I've spoken out against AR-15s, but I do want to mention that, let's go back to that common sense thing. We have guns in our home. I've never touched them, never seen them. They're in a safe that's by the bed. My husband is an Army veteran, infantry, served in Kuwait, decorated expert marksman. He is trained on how to safely use them. We have small children, so they are locked up at all times. They exist solely for the morally good purpose of protecting the lives of the children and wife and my husband. So I'm not opposed to the idea of gun ownership. I'm opposed to this extreme gun culture that is terrified and resistant to any sort of regulations for those who can have something so dangerous. That's what I think is common sense. It's not take everyone's guns away or, allow anyone to walk into a store and walk out with an assault rifle. It doesn't have to be that way. In fact, when you look at polling, most people in the United States support basic reforms when it comes to our current gun laws. So I wanted to mention that. So I believe in the right to self-defense. I don't want to tie anybody's hands that might want to protect their family. I would certainly not want my hands to be tied. So since we talked about guns, thank you for just letting me explain that I'm not against gun ownership. I'm against irresponsible gun ownership, and I'm against our gun culture.
And you've explained your position very well. I want to introduce one last issue and how it can be addressed at the pragmatic level, and it should be, but how I think the deeper issues involved are not addressed nearly to the extent that they should be. We in Los Angeles have a staggering problem with homelessness. There have been any number of interventions involving tens of millions of dollars. And the most recent count, as in last week, the number of homeless in the city proper has gone up again. Not by the amount that it did the last round around, but it's gone up again. We now have over 41,000 homeless people in the city, pushing 70,000 in the county. Now, we have a profound problem with drugs, and primarily with meth, which has different synthetic qualities in the last decade than it did before. And we have profound mental health problems. A question we have to ask ourselves, a deeper question, and I think it's the kind of question that the party can raise and get more center stage, is why do we have such a drug problem, and why do we have such a mental health problem? We have to deal with what to do tonight with the folks who are suffering from this.
Exactly.
But we have to ask also, why is it that we have this? And I think one of the reasons is the dissolution of family life. And I think another reason is the toxicity of the culture. That said,
I think another, let's not forget, the complete absence of a social safety net as well, and our criminal justice system making redemption completely impossible for felons, where they can't find a place to live, they can't get a job, and where else are they going to go? We have a lot of ways that we do things that make this problem worse.
Yes. While I agree with that, we don't have the absence of the social security net, a safety net in Los Angeles the way people have it in Texas. We have a lot of that. And what we have is, here's the net, and the homeless people reject it because they're deeply mentally disturbed and deeply addicted to drugs.
Well, okay.
It's a combination.
It is, but in fairness, though, I do want to say, social safety net is worth nothing if it can't be accessed. Let me give you an example. I have friends on the streets that my husband had, gave something I cooked and packed for lunch one day to a gentleman, and he liked my cooking, so now I've taken breakfast and dinner, and he lives in a car wash that has, been, closed down. And I have met I'm a former social worker, by the way, MSW. And I've met some of the other homeless folks around there and talked to them. It's hard for them to get jobs if they don't have a phone, any way to be contacted. There are free phones in Texas. We qualify for the, Obama phones, the, Lifeline program. Well, where are they going to send that phone if you don't have an address, and how are you going to get one? So that was one problem. There was nowhere to send it. So, by the way, a lot of homeless folks use this address. There's a lot of people that live here for the sake of unemployment and benefits. I'm waiting for the state to think that something is fishy going on. It's really not. It's one thing to have a social safety net, and another thing to have one that's actually accessible. You're right. I agree with you that a lot of, the problems aren't addressed by that. I mean, you have unmedicated schizophrenia. You have, all sorts of problems that, make using those things as bootstraps to pull yourself up by impossible. I agree with you. However, I also think that states and places that do have the safety net, which I strongly support, I'm in favor of it, tend to also use that as a cop-out to not do anything more. Not do, okay, well, we offer Medi-Cal, and we offer, all of these different, programs. We're doing our part to help homeless people. Well, no, you're not, because they're still homeless. The way you fix homelessness is you provide a home. It's actually cost effective. It's cheaper to provide stable, long-term housing for people than the consequences of leaving them unhoused when it comes to, hospital bills and property damage and things like that. And, it's associated with.
Yes. I couldn't agree more. At the same time, I know someone, known him for years and years and years, still in his early 30s, who's had, this is a conservative estimate, Jackie, who's had 50 Obama phones. Handy thing about an Obama phone is you can sell it and get some meth for the next week. And then we have then we have the whole celebrity culture in Los Angeles. We have people who don't need a safety net regularly dying of overdose regularly, have no capacity for an enduring family life. And we have to ask, why is this the case? Yes, treat everything we can treat, but why is it that there are these profound dislocations in the first place? Well,
adverse childhood experiences.
That's something for another.
That's my answer. Yeah, adverse childhood experiences.
Let's end as we always do on the open door with the gospel for today. This is from Luke. When Jesus had finished all his words to the people, he entered Capernaum. A centurion there had a slave who was ill and about to die, and he was valuable to him. When he heard about Jesus, he sent elders of the Jews to him, asking him to come and save the life of his slave. They approached Jesus and strongly urged him to come, saying, "He deserves to have you do this for him, for he loves our nation, and he built a synagogue for us." And Jesus went with them, but when he was only a short distance from the house, the centurion sent friends to tell him, "Lord, do not trouble yourself, for I am not worthy to have you enter under my roof. Therefore, I did not consider myself worthy to come to you. But you say the word, and let my servant be healed, for I too am a person subject to authority, with soldiers subject to me. And I say to one, go, and he goes, and to another, come here, and he comes, and to my slave, do this, and he does it." When Jesus heard this, he was amazed at him, and turning, said to the crowds following him, "I tell you, not even in Israel have I found such faith." When the messengers returned to the house, they found the slave in good health. Come, Lord Jesus, come.
Hello, God's beloved. I'm Annabelle Mosley, author, professor of theology, and host of Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. I invite you to listen in and find inspiration along this sacred journey we're traveling together to make our lives a masterpiece and, with God's grace, become saints. Join me, Annabelle Mosley, for Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. God bless you. Remember, you're never alone. God is always with you.
Thank you for listening to a production of WCAT Radio. Please join us in our mission of evangelization. And don't forget, love lifts up when knowledge takes flight.